You know, how does it fit the program?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I have all the answers to that, but there are two different types of charter systems that can be created. One that's created by the local school system. And like she said earlier, if parents come together and say, we want a charter school, the local system says, we're not going to do it, they have an avenue that did until this year to go to the state, and the state can look at it and decide whether to build one or not. As far as the physical plant, because a lot of this is outsourced, I guess the local system would fund if it's a local charter school, whatever building that they're in as far as the capital expenditures there.
Yeah. My understanding is, I think with all of the local charter systems, that all of the ones I'm familiar with, they exist in buildings that are vacant and owned by those local school boards. So they haven't been starting up in new facilities or renovating facilities. We don't have a system in Georgia right now where the money follows the child. So that isn't happening. However, I'm sorry?
Unless they're disabled.
Right,
children.
right. There's a special needs scholarship. But if that were to happen, if we did have a true system of money following the child, and those children are attending a private school, let's say, and they get some amount of money to go to that private school that's from the tax base, it would make sense that if you have a system where money follows the child, then that money would go for whatever educational needs that child would have, whether it's buying books or paint on the wall, or whatever it is. But and the other reason charters are so attractive to a lot of folks is they cost much less per child to achieve the same or better results. And so even there, the taxpayer gets a benefit in spending less money per child on a student. That's part of the argument anyway. That's not necessarily my argument, that's part of the argument.
One more thing that I'm concerned about is the all-inclusive. That's going on in Bartow County. Is that statewide or Bartow County?
I don't understand.
When you bring in the children which are disabled, disabled child is fine at a certain point. But there's times when, this is my opinion, that there's no way that child can gain anything out being in the class with children that are not handicapped. Not taking anything away from us, I love it.
Right.
But, I think that creates things in the system that really needs to be looked at.
And that again is
better taken care of in our own private facility.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we did the special needs scholarships.
And then again, that requirement that we educate those children until they're 22 years old is part of the federal requirements.
But in order to be all inclusive and bring that in here, it's all about the dollar that they get from the feds. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand completely what you're saying, but the children,
by making it all inclusive, where all the children can come in, the handicapped children and everything, be in the school system. The local school or the county school system can get more funds from the government because they allow that.
well, they don't have a choice in it. They have to do it. And a big part of the federal money that comes in is to pay for those special needs students who have higher per student expense. And in a discussion I had with a local school leader, I'll just say that to protect his or her anonymity, I was told in the conversation last week that if we eliminated federal funding completely, we would have to come up with about 1% of our overall budget for funding those disabled needs children to replace that federal funding. So we'd have to make up the difference, but it would not be the full 5% of federal funding. It would be about 1% of the overall budget.
How come we could do it so much cheaper if they're not involved?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you get rid of the federal funding, you're going to get rid of a lot of that red tape we got on the bait and switch program. Well, the compliance with the federal programs does. We still have to educate those children by law even if we don't accept the federal money. That's part of it we don't escape from. But to comply with federal law, to do that would take about 1% of our current budget level. So you'd eliminate that 5% federal funding, and you'd have to come up with 1% from another part of your budget. But again, you're not having to comply with a lot of the other red tape. You save enough money, and that's what we're, it's a question mark at this point. Would it save enough money to make a difference? That's part of what we want to know.
We need to get gunpowder out of government, don't we?
Absolutely.
A question, just listening, and we don't have children, so we're not that involved in the school system, but it seems, and I'm not sure this is correct, but charter schools seem to be a direct reflection on the effectiveness of our public school system. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing in a sense?
I think that's a fair statement, and I think that's why we don't have charter schools in Bartow County.
Okay. When you start having them is when you really need to stop, take a breath, and look at it.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yes.
Senator Loudermilk, how will your immigration bill affect education?
That's a good question. The immigration bill. I was about to say, yeah, this is a good conversation. Let me say this before I answer that. I think all of us have the same goal in mind, which is improve our education system in Georgia. It's just what's the best way of getting there, and that's where we may have some differing opinions. But again, keep in mind what is proposed under 1162 is simply, should the state still be able to do what it is doing now? And that's ultimately going to be decided by the people who, in reality, all of these systems, they're the people's school system. And I ran into something just this week. A friend of mine in the legislature has worked extensively in reintroducing American history statewide in this state, something we're lacking in a lot of our areas. It's the core constitutional foundation of a free market system that we are no longer teaching in our school system. And again, when Christian and I talk about this, we're not talking about here, but from our duty as state legislators, as a state system as a whole, we're doing a very bad job. Our children are coming out not understanding even the basic concepts of a constitutional republic. And so we were introducing legislation that would move us in that direction. We received a lot of pushback from elements of the Department of Education. Dr. Barge, his office was actually working with us on this. But the response is how dare you legislators tell us what we need to be teaching? And my response was, the school systems belong to the people. The people elect us to be their voice. You have to be responsive to the will of the people. And so that's what we're going at with this 1162, is saying, we're going to put it out there to the people. It has to go that way because it is a constitutional amendment. But again, we're just trying to, fix the problem that is out there and find the best way to have an educated society to meet the job demands that are coming up. One of the question was, we have a bill that I introduced that does three things. Now, all you hear about in the paper and on CNN, I was on CNN, probably every news channel there has been, because it's one of those things that they like to report on. But the bill does three things. One is our immigration bill we passed in the last year in 2006 requires that to receive a public benefit, which is federal law. Federal law states that to receive public benefit, you have to be legally in this country or you have to be an American citizen. The bill we passed says no state-funded benefits can go to anyone who is illegally in this state. As a result, federal government and state government defines what a public benefit is. And of course, it's, food stamps, welfare, public housing, these typical social programs. But also business licensing, professional licensing, like a nursing license, teaching certificate is a public benefit, as defined by federal law and state law. Right now, let's say if you're a nurse, you have to go get your nursing license. Every 2 years you have to go back and renew, because you have to take continuing education, you have to go renew. Well, the way the law is right now, every 2 years you have to